So now that the center of that circle is coincident with the origin, it's locked in. I can no longer grab it and move it. So if I try, it won't let me. It tells me it's coincident. Well, the diameter can still change. So now I have to lock in what the diameter is. So I can go over here into my sketch. I have smart dimensioning, which allows me to add dimensions. And what it does is it gives me the dimension that most makes sense to what I'm trying to do. So in this case, if I click on this, it's a circle. It's going to give me the diametric dimension. That's what that little circle with the slash means. That's a diameter symbol. So I'm going to put that down, and then I'm going to change that. And so we're going to say that that dimension is, let's look back at the drawing, that's 5.5 inches, 5.5 inches. Okay, now notice, black. It's fully constrained. Nothing can change. Over here in the sketch, there is no dash mark, so that means everything's good. And just a little point aside here, let's say that instead of being 5 inches, this was 150 millimeters, but my model's in inches. I can sit here and go 150 mm for millimeter, and it will automatically convert that into inches because I'm working in the inch system. If you come down here, you can on the fly switch what the unit system is. We're working in IPS, which is inch pound second. I'm going to go back and change this to 5.5. Hit enter. And there we go. It's all good. So notice that there's this little stoplight on both the sketch and the part. What does that mean? Well, that just means that a rebuild is required to fully finish it. And all that does is you hit rebuild, it rebuilds it. I have a sketch there. Okay, now let's turn that sketch into, it's a 2D sketch. I want to make it a 3D part. So we're no longer doing sketches. We're going to go into features. And so I have a whole bunch of different things here. Extrude boss base means I'm going to take a 2D sketch and extrude it. Revolved means that I'm going to take a 2D section, I'm going to revolve it around a center line. Sweeps, lofts, and boundaries are all advanced surfacing techniques. We'll talk a little bit about that later in the class. So what I want to do is I just want to extrude a boss base. And it tells me select a plane to sketch a cross section on. So we can just immediately go and sketch one, but we've already got a cross section, so I'm going to say I'm going to use that cross section. Now, it gives me a little thing here that shows me what my part is going to end up looking like, which is kind of nice. It gives me a little preview. So a couple things to note as you're doing this here. You've got, in direction one, you've got some different options you can do. You've got, so you got blind, which means that you're just going to give it a dimension. Up to vertex, you'll select a vertex. Up to surface, you'll select a surface, and they will go to that vertex or surface. Offset from surface, you'll tell it, I want you to go and be 1/2 inch away from the surface, and it will do it. Up to body is just like up to surface, up to vertex. Mid-plane, what that does, it means it's going to grow in either direction. But we're just going to do a blind because we have a dimension that we want to send it, and we're going to say 0.75 inches. So now we've given that circle now some depth. So we're going to turn it into a solid part. Now, you have direction 2, you can go and you can sit here and go, okay, we'll make this one go an inch the other way kind of thing. And so you have it going in 2 different directions at once with different dimensions, but we're just going to do one direction. And there we go, when we hit the check mark. So now what we have is, you notice it went gray. It is a solid part now. It's over here in the feature tree. It's a boss extrude. And you go, there's a sketch that's tagged to it. That's the 3D part. So now we've built our first 3-dimensional piece. And this is eventually going to become that little flange. So as I look at things, you've got different display styles up here that you can use. What I'm using is the shaded with edges, which is showing me the hard lines. I prefer this one because I think it's just easier to see. You can go to, you can go to here, which is shaded without the hard lines. I particularly don't like that, personal preference. You can show wireframe, where it just hides all the stuff that you can't see. It can be useful for some stuff. This is wireframe, but you can see the hidden lines there. This can sometimes be useful when you got an assembly and you're trying to see what's going on the inside and you don't want to do a section. And finally, we have all the lines. It just shows you all the lines. I find this the most confusing. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes not. Anyway, so let's go back to our solid part there. So now that we've got our solid part, we can take a look at it in a couple different ways. This little view box here, you can sit here and go, you can look at top view, bottom view, front view. You can just play around with that and put it to any place that you want. You can, as you click it, you'll notice the view cube comes up, so you can pick a certain face that you want to take a look at from. You guys can play around with that at your leisure. One important one that I find very handy is this guy right here, which is normal to. So if you just pick a plane, it's going to give you the normal view to that plane. Okay, so let's go and build that next part, that little boss that goes in the middle. But instead of just drawing a feature on the surface of this and extruding it out a certain distance, let's go and actually build a new plane off of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a reference plane. And you're going to notice with a lot of this stuff, there's multiple ways to do things. So you might find a different way to do it, but let's go. And we're going to go into reference geometry. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a new reference plane. Now, I'm going to want to tag that reference plane to my initial front plane. I'm going to offset it from there. So you've got three different references that you can use to put together the plane. I'm going to use the first reference here. And so what I'm going to do, since I want to reference it to the front plane, which I can't see, if it was unhidden, I'd just be able to click on it. But you'll notice that the part has popped up here. I can click on this to bring in the feature tree, and I'll be able to go and grab anything. I'm just going to grab the front plane itself. Now it's telling me it's fully defined. I'm going to the front plane. And so what I want to do, I'm going to grab this arrow just to, I want to pull this out a little bit. Actually, no, I can't, because I picked the reference plane. They're making them coincident, which is not exactly what I want to do. So I'm going to come here and put in my offset distance, and I want to offset it from the plane. Now, if I look back at that initial drawing, it's the flange part that we just made. It's 3/4 of an inch, but that middle boss sticks out 2.25 inches from the front plane. So I'm going to offset this 2.25 inches from the front plane. And so there we go. I've got that plane's 2.25 inches off that front plane where we started, and I'm going to hit accept. So now what I have is I have another reference plane there. Shows up in the feature tree here. And as always, we can go and go edit feature, and if we ever wanted to change that. So now I want to build, get rid of that, the auto save thing. I want to go and I want to build that center boss off of this. So what I'm going to do, instead of going to sketch this time, I'm just going to say extrude boss base. And I'm going to select the plane this time, which is the front plane of that. So now you'll notice that I'm in the sketch tool. So what I'm going to do is I want to sketch another circle on that front plane. And you notice that little yellow box that pops up. What is that saying? Well, that's that coincident constraint. So since I'm putting it right on the origin of that plane, it tells me that if I click right there, I'm going to be coincident with that middle, which is what I want. And then I'll draw my circle there. Notice it is not blue. Now I can come over here because it goes, oh, radius. I could put in the radius. In this case, my diameter is 2.75. I can do math in these and go, okay, we'll divide that by 2, and it will automatically put in the right radius. But as I look at that, notice it's blue. What happened? Just because you put the radius in does not put a constraining dimension on it. So what I'm going to do is I'll go smart dimension, I'll tag that, and so now I've put in a hard dimension. Now it is perfectly constrained. Everything's fully defined. So what I'll do from here because I've already set my thing. This little symbol here means complete the sketch. I'm going to complete the sketch. Now, because I had this in as a extrude feature, that's what I started as and made my sketch, it immediately drops me into the boss extrude. And so this time, instead of blind, I'm going to tell it to go up to a surface. And it's going to give me the face plane. Well, I'm going to pick that plane that I just put in, hit enter, and there we go. Now I have that little boss that comes up to that plane. And so that's another way that I can create features. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come here. I'm just going to hide that plane. I don't need that anymore. And so now we've added material. What I want to do is I'm going to want to take material out, because now we have that hole that's drilled right down the middle that was 1.5 inches. So this time, instead of doing an extrude boss, I'm going to do what's called an extrude cut. I'm going to take material away from my model. So much the same way, I'm going to click that face there. Now I'm sketching on that plane. I'm going to draw my circle. Once again, there it is, coincident. I'm going to draw that out. I'll put my dimension in. Diametric dimension of 1.5 inches. So now it's fully constrained. I'm ready to go. I'm going to complete that. And now instead of adding material, I'm going to subtract material. You'll notice I've got some of the same features. Blind, which just means I give it a depth. Through all means that I will just keep cutting until I've cut all the material away. Through all both, if I am going in both directions, I'll blow through both. Up to next, it'll just cut until it hits the next surface. Up to surface or up to vertex, I pick a surface or vertex, it'll cut to there. Offset from surface, I can say keep cutting until you get to 1/2 inch from the surface. That's actually kind of handy if you're drilling holes in something and you want to make sure the base is always 1/2 inch thick, but you don't know how large the part's going to end up being, so you can do that. Up to body, mid-plane, all kind of stuff. But what we're going to do is I just want to blow it right through. I'm just going to go through all, and then I'm going to say enter. And so now I look at it, I have my part that's got a through hole through it now. Okay, so we're well on the way to getting our flange done, and we'll continue that in the next video.